Hi guys and welcome back. It's Al from Altruistic Channel, and this is going to be specifically geared towards kind of a glossary type of terminology review that you might encounter now that we've laid the foundational work for the basic understanding behind the collective consciousness and ascending and what this is all kind of about. So along the way, you're going to come across some key terms that I just wanted to briefly go over before we move on into the more advanced stuff of the spiritual journey. So starting off with the collective consciousness, as we all know, it is basically the groupthink mentality where you are tapping into the collective stance of society as working as individuals all in one, joining the oneness of the divine light and walking that path with them. So you're tapping into that groupthink mentality, right? So the next thing that would happen is that you would be awakened. And so that means that you literally become aware that the reality that you were in is not exactly the way that you thought it was. And you start to become aware increasingly of other realities or other components to your existence that you were not readily aware of the first time around, like the first incarnation of just kind of being almost in slumber. Then, when you actually become aware of it, you start your path, and that's called the ascension process. You're ascending beyond the states of illusion or disillusion in many ways, and you're basically rising above it and walking down the path of spirituality. When you walk down your path of spirituality, what they're referring to is the trilogy. The mind, the body, and the soul become one. And though many people state that that the body, physical body, will have to yield to the soul's decree, I vehemently disagree with that. I would say that the truth is that you have to partner in balance and walk in between the two realities, where the soul and the body are united in their attempts to move forward. And that's the trajectory that I think is best walking with the divine spirit. The divine spirit obviously is a reference to God, Allah, whatever your basic principle is for creator or spirit. And so that's something very important. We don't use it as a divisive tool here. We use it as an empowerment to take accountability for yourself. With that regard, when you actually are working through the ascension process, you're going to go through different incarnations and different phases and dimensional aspects to it. When people refer to the 3D, they're referring to the third dimension, and we're working towards the fifth dimension, the soul dimension, right? And so, though many people think that we're just gonna I don't necessarily always understand the concept behind the idea that you just start working on your spirituality, because you still have to function within this reality too. So just remember that you're working within both of them, and almost again like a dual purpose type of existence. The soul's journey is a very interesting one. It's built upon eons and eons of evolution. It's been around since energy. It's an energy incarnate, essentially. And so, with that in mind, understand that you have lived many, many, many lifetimes. And so you're going to encounter something called karmics. So the karmic cycle is basically this. It's a karmic debt or a karmic situation that you are basically going to have to face in this lifetime that is going to trigger some sort of reaction from you to test where you are in your evolution as a soul. Right? So typically, though, these are beings that you know from past lives that were actually friends. So they're almost like a frenemy concept. So be aware that they have no idea why they're triggering you or if they're even triggering you. It's a reaction that you will have to them, not always they will have to you. Having said that, with the karmics, there's something that goes a step beyond the soulmate, which is the idea of the twin flame. So a twin flame is essentially cut from the same cloth as you are, whether you are male-female dynamic, male-male, or female-female. Basically, God was infinitely wise and created us in the stance of having, like everything else, a dual, another person or another version of ourselves that would mirror us, and that when we got together, we would do the ultimate divine balancing act, basically, and walk in alignment with the divine all-knowing and accomplish great things for spirituality and the advancement of the race. The problem with with this particular concept is not a problem per se. It's just a dynamic that happens because you two are in exactly the same. You are going to be almost opposite in many ways, where you balance each other out because it's about balancing. So you're going to have a tumultuous beginning, and it's almost a hate to some of us. And it doesn't always go necessarily all that well, and there's a whole male-female dynamic, even in the male-male, female-female. You know, spirituality is non-gender specific, so you can be a feminine, divine feminine, or you can be divine masculine in a male or female. So don't get stuck in gender, because here in the collective, we believe that gender is irrelevant. It's more about the energy that they're trying to balance out. But with these two particular entities, the karmics and the twin flames, there can be problems, and so you just want to make sure that you do your work. Now, when we refer to doing the work, it's really simple. That is doing the process of looking at your shadow side, looking at the negative aspects to self that are preventing you from walking in the divine alignment between the trilogy, the mind, the body, and the soul, right? I know I talk really fast, but I've always talked that fast. You should hear the way I think, because I'm actually 2 steps ahead here. But the next thing that I wanted to mention with this particular concept is the fact that when you are on your journey, you may encounter something called the soul's journey into night. Okay, so the soul's long journey into night is essentially where a soul, having lived eons and eons of time since energy began, will at some point, and nobody knows necessarily which lifetime it will be triggered into walking down this path of solidarity. Will have to face its karmic lessons and all of its past mistakes or past deeds, and will have to atone for it in the lifetime that they're currently in. So for me, it happened this lifetime. Not everybody happens this lifetime. The problem with this particular journey is that it is notoriously mass destructive for your life, because it almost always strikes as a result of someone who is unaware that they're entering it. Luckily now, with enough of us being on YouTube and enough of us being out there, you'll be aware of what you're walking into. But for a lot of us, we didn't know, and so it was like a big shock to the system. And I'm talking about everything came tumbling down within that line, within those guidelines. When we refer to something called the tower moments, these are specific things that we have built in our lives that we found structurally sound, that were immovable, that become weakened when we become awakened, and when we start to realize that there's more to what we are encountering than what we see. And so they can come tumbling down, and that jolts your life as well. And so these are all different aspects and things that you're going to encounter as you walk down the path of spirituality in our belief system. At the end of the day, though, here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that every faith-based principle always has its own jargon. So if you ever get lost, just ask one of us what we're talking about. Or better yet, tarot. The tarot community is really, really amazing for connecting us with the divine source, especially if you haven't been able to tap into the collective consciousness yet yourself. You're going to want to check in with them, and then the more you watch them and the more you engage it, you'll start to learn one about the community, because we all keep popping up in each other's BS, and sometimes I'm just like, would you shut the fuck up? I don't need to know that much about myself. But having said that, you will also learn the jargon, and you'll get familiar with what we're talking about, and it just makes you not have to ask as much questions. And so it's just a little bit more of ease as you go into this. Again, guys, when it comes to spirituality, it is a personal choice and a journey of how you decide to walk in alignment with God, or whatever you call the divine power to be. It is ultimately up to you to do the work and to make this magic happen. The end result is a fantastic lifestyle and a lifetime of service to the divine power that walks in alignment with giving you, as a reciprocity, the dividends back. So you are rewarded with abundance, but without it being like the only reason you're doing it. You show up to what's called a mission, which is your what your deeds are, or your purpose, along the lines of what your soul's purpose is on this lifetime. And so you serve that out, and it's called mission, showing up for mission. Some of us have dual purposes and so forth. But the point is, when you show up 100%, and you are dedicated to the betterment of yourself and then of humanity, because we're going to save the planet. And then we'll be initiated into whatever the next phase is. And that's it for me on Al at altruisticchannels.com. I keep saying .com. Anyway, have a great night. Bye.